Now, a number of you have travelled to get here today. I actually met a fellow who's travelled from Brisbane to get here as well. There might be some other interstate people here too. So we have a significant major draw card with our next speaker, Shellie Pfohl, who's the Executive Director of President Obama's Council on Fitness, Sports and Nutrition. And Shellie manages the activities and operations of the President's Council and leads the Council's efforts related to the First Lady Michelle Obama's National Let's Move initiative, which is a big deal in the States. There have been some really interesting work undertaken, which I'm really looking forward to hearing about, and some encouraging results. So I think we're all really excited to hear what you have to say. Thanks very much, Shellie.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, come on, you can do better than that. Good morning. All right, that's better. Hey, if I can be awake, given my little jet lag here, you all can be awake as well. But I'm finally settling in, I think, to Sydney time. So it's so wonderful to be here. Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you to Minister Skinner. Thank you especially to Peter McHugh and the Premier's Council on Active Living for inviting me. Thank you so much, Peter, for all your help and support in getting me here. Thank you to the Heart Foundation as well for all of your support and hospitality, and looking forward to the ride on Sunday, right? The Gear Up Girl, right? Who's doing Gear Up Girl? All right, good, good. A lot of hands. Good. We'll catch a few more by Sunday, all right? So it is truly my honor to be here and represent the United States to just share some information, share a little bit about what we're doing in the area of childhood obesity. Some of what you see may flow into adult physical activity and nutrition as well, but largely we'll focus on the childhood obesity space, if you will. But I also want to say that the only reason I said I would come, or I'm sorry, one of the reasons I said I would come, is that I want to learn as much from you as I hope to impart. So I will be here until the 17th, and I'm taking a little side trip down to Canberra as well. So I really look forward to hearing and seeing and seeing in person some of the great things that you're doing here in Australia, so I can take it back to the States. So I'm going to share with you just a little brief history about the President's Council on Fitness, Sports, and Nutrition. And by the way, we're celebrating our 60th anniversary this year. We've been around since 60 years. President Eisenhower started us in 1956, really out of a sense of national pride, because the data was showing that European youth were healthier, more fit than our American youth. So we couldn't have that, right? We had to have an initiative that, out of national pride, to get our kids fitter. And so he started actually the President's Council on Youth Fitness back in 1956. It was President Kennedy that expanded our mission and scope to include all people. So we became the President's Council on Physical Fitness and Sports. Also, obviously, expanding to sports and understanding how sport can play into a healthy American as well. This is actually an article he wrote. President Kennedy wrote 2 articles for Sports Illustrated. One was called The Soft American, and the other one was called The Vigor We Need. And so those are really kind of landmark publications, if you will, as part of our history. It's been really interesting because of our 60th anniversary. We're really digging into our archives now and looking at our how we've come to be where we are today. You might recognize a couple of these folks, President Bush, the senior, and then also, we also have President Clinton here. That my point of all of this, and certainly to present day with President Obama, my point to all this is that the President's Council on Fitness, Sports, and Nutrition, President Obama added nutrition to our name in 2010. So now we're the President's Council on Fitness, Sports, and Nutrition. And I think that really tells us all, it reinforces to us all the importance of energy in and energy out, right? We've got to look at it all together. So it's still a national priority. Every president has left his mark on our council and might have different priorities for his administration, but it's still a priority. Health is a national priority. Now, our council itself is made up of 25 volunteers. These folks often are former or current professional or Olympic athletes. Now, with nutrition in our name, we have famous chefs and the like. We have physicians on our council, but we also have the head of physical education for Miami, the fourth largest school district in our country. We have really a variety of people that help lead and serve and lift up our programs and our messaging. Now, as Chris said, we also do a lot to support the First Lady's Let's Move initiative. How many of you heard of Let's Move? Great, lots of you. So Let's Move is, as we know, is the First Lady's initiative to really solve the issue of childhood obesity within a generation. That's the mission, okay? And that's done in many ways, mostly through partnerships. From a federal government standpoint, there are 16 different agencies. We're one of them. 16 different agencies that help lift up and support the Let's Move initiative. And I often say I think one of the biggest legacies that will be left, one of the many legacies, but one of them from a federal government standpoint, is that it's really knocked down the silos between our agencies, between the different departments, or you might call ministries here probably. And so now with the transportation people are talking to the health people who are talking to the education people who are talking to the housing and urban development people and on and on. And so it's amazing, right? What happens when we all talk to each other. And I think that ongoing, because we have career employees, and some of, similar to many of you in this room where you've made this a career. And many of our career employees have been working in this space perhaps for decades. And now the white hot light is shown on this issue. And the work will continue no matter what happens post this administration. We know that there will be a new administration coming in January. But no matter what, we have created such momentum that there's no way that it will go backwards. It will only go forwards. So a little bit about the state of our nation. I know you all know your stats, right? But a little bit about us. So what we know in the U.S. is this may be the first generation in our country to live fewer years than their parents. So as many as 5 fewer years than their parents. First time in human history that we're going backwards, right? Our kids are spending on average about 7.5 hours a day in front of a screen. Okay, now that might be in front of a computer doing homework or at school doing educational things. Okay, we get that. That's a good thing. But there's also a lot of screen time that is just flat out sedentary in front of a TV, in front of gaming devices, etc. So our goal is, of course, to make more of that sedentary screen time active screen time, because I'm pretty sure the technology is not going away. So we've got to figure out better ways to get more active screen time. We know that physical education is being cut due to budgets, due to a focus on test scores. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. Youth sports participation is declining. Physical inactivity and obesity are causing certain long-term chronic health conditions. And certainly all of these things and more are contributing to our challenge to be successful as individuals, as states, and as certainly a nation. And when I look at your stats, does this sound familiar, by the way? A little bit familiar? I mean, in terms of obesity, I think you guys are 5th in the world, only, right behind U.S. and 3 other nations. So we're pretty much all in this together, right? We got a lot of the same issues. And, sorry, just to prove the point here. So you all seen these maps? I affectionately call the fat maps. So our Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have really looked at obesity over the course of now several decades. Okay, hold on, we got a little bit of a lag. There we go. So these, just real quickly, so this is from 1990, and I could show you every year since then. I think I've got up till 2010. Some of the later ones are still coming out. But So what these colors mean, so white is that we didn't have any data at the time. The light blue is that less than 10% of the population in those states was overweight or obese. And then the medium blue is 10 to 14% of the population in those states were overweight or obese. Okay, by 1995, we had to add a darker blue, which was 15 to 19% overweight or obese. And then by another 5 years later, we had to add a new color, which is greater than 20%. And then 2005, we actually had to have two more colors. We had 25 to 29%, and then the darker red is greater than 30%. And then we end up in 2010. We've lost all the blue completely, and now we're really between 20 and even upward, greater than 30% overweight or obese. This is not good news. This is not good news. Now, what about childhood obesity rates? So here is by state. You can tell, and I don't have year to year, but this is, I think these are the most recent numbers that we have thus far. And you can tell, and I'm sure you can look across Australia too, you know that there are areas within your country that have higher prevalence rates on any number of different health issues, health indicators, right? So for childhood obesity, we know our southern states have higher rates of obesity, and this slide certainly bears that out. With the more northern states are doing a little better. Okay? So, and these range from, there's no red on there yet, but the purple that you see there is 20 to 25% of the kids in that state being overweight or obese. And I'll touch on it now. So some of you have heard that our children at the early stages, so 2 to 5 year olds, that we're seeing a pretty significant reduction in childhood obesity rates among our 2 to 5 year olds. Okay, so there's cause for celebration, right? A little bit, right? We think we're moving in the right direction. Okay, I'm sharing it with you the bad news first. The good news is coming, but what we know is that those trends are leveling out, and for our 2 to 5 year olds, we're seeing improvements there. And you're going to ask me, like, so why? How is that? How did you achieve those improvements? So what we're attributing that to is an increase in awareness of breastfeeding. Okay. Also, our work to support child care settings, and all different types of child care settings. So wherever those 2 to 5 year olds are, we're supporting them on the physical activity and nutrition side of things. Okay. And I'm going to talk about Let's Move Child Care in a moment. And then finally, I would say our federally supported nutrition or food programs. So those families that need help in terms of feeding and nutrition, the support that they're getting now is through much more healthier foods. So they're able to purchase many more healthier foods now through the federal system than they were in the past. So I think all of those things combined, I know the researchers in the room, you'll want to figure out, okay, which one of those really made the most difference. The bottom line is we don't know, and we may never know. And one of the things I hope that you'll take home today from my presentation is that unless we look at this issue from a systemic perspective, that we look at all the systems that impact childhood obesity, in my opinion, we will not reach our goals. We will not reach our goals. We've got to look at this as a systemic issue. Okay, so physical inactivity. You all know Design to Move? Who knows Design to Move? Couple people, not too many. Okay, so Design to Move is really an international initiative, if you will, to promote physical activity. And these are just a couple slides from the Design to Move materials. And this really talks about preschoolers and really the fact that the cycle of inactivity really flows from childhood into adulthood, certainly impacts all of those things that those of us in this room know. Here's kind of a nod to what I was just saying in terms of looking at the social determinants of health. We've got to look at all of these things with equal vigor, in my humble opinion, if we're truly going to create change. So we've got to look at the family. We've got to look at our land and our environment, the built environment. We've got to look at access issues. We've got to look at gender differences, our culture, and break down barriers along cultures and languages, etc. All of those things are equally important. So we all know this, but I'm going to say it anyway. And this slide happens to focus on physical activity, is that one of our mantras in America now is that active kids do better. And I would just broaden that to say healthy kids do better. Kids who are physically active and have good nutrition do better. They do better in many ways. So we know that kids who are physically active, and also around obesity, when we talk about obesity, for me, obesity is the symptom, right? We've got to look upstream. It's physical inactivity and poor nutrition that are the root cause. Obesity is the symptom of what we're experiencing, right? And then outcomes down the road are the chronic disease and illnesses and all the other things that we know all too well, right? But I would tell you that regardless of weight, physical activity has so many positive benefits, regardless of weight. Physical activity, we know that kids who are physically active have lower rates of chronic disease and therefore help curb and lower our healthcare costs. Kids who are physically active are less likely to smoke or abuse drugs, are less absent from school, less likely to drop out of school, less likely to become pregnant, are less violent, spend less time in the principal's office, and do better on tests and academics. So the academic success goes up, their time on task. They're more likely to obviously have positive behavior. And I call physical activity a positive gateway behavior. You ever thought about it that way? Like physical activity is the gateway to addressing so many other issues. So to say that active kids do better, they not only do better from a health standpoint, they do better in life, period. So I just ask you to think about that as well. I know we're really focused on obesity here, but I would tell you, not every kid needs to lose weight, right? It's not always just about weight. And for a lot of kids, we don't want to focus on weight. We just want to focus on lifestyle, right? And how do we instill the love of movement in kids and the love of good nutrition within our young people? If we do that, the obesity stuff will take care of itself. Just my opinion. So what are we doing about it, right? We got issues. You have issues. Let me just tell you what we're doing about these issues in the U.S. Let's Move. Everybody knows, everybody in this building, I think, raised their hand and said, yeah, we heard of Let's Move. That's the First Lady's initiative to solve the issue of childhood obesity within a generation. And so there are 5 goals to Let's Move, 5 goals. One is to ensure kids have a healthy start, so kind of that early childhood focus, right? Empowering parents and caregivers to make healthy decisions is another. So how are we giving parents the tools they need to make healthy choices, healthy decisions? Providing healthy foods in schools, because what parents told the First Lady is that, hey, it doesn't matter what I do at home or what I do at the grocery store if I have to send my kids to schools who don't serve healthy foods. So we did something about that, and I'll mention that in a minute. We want to improve access to healthy and affordable food. So have you heard the term food deserts? So we have a lot of food deserts in America where people do not, especially in the inner city, well, and rural areas as well, quite honestly, do not have access to healthy foods. Not access, not ready access, and or they weren't affordable. And so now our government is incentivizing companies to be where people are, and to provide those healthy foods at an affordable cost. And then, of course, reintegrating physical activity back into our kids' lives. Those are the 5 goals of Let's Move. Now, there are, within Let's Move, within that umbrella, there are 10 sub-initiatives, and you see the logos here. Let's Move Active Schools, which I'll talk about more. Let's Move Cities, Towns, and Counties, which I'm going to spend some time on. There's also a whole movement on getting salad bars in schools. There's a Let's Move Museums and Gardens, okay? There's a Chef's Move to School. There's a Let's Move Faith in Communities, working with faith and community-based organizations. Let's Move Childcare. Let's Move Outside is another one, and getting our kids, reintroducing our kids to the outdoors, right? So combating nature deficit disorder is what it is. And then Let's Move in Indian country, again paying homage to our native people. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about each, or a couple of these. Sorry, not all of them, but a couple of those that are most relevant. But I also want to mention the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act. So one of the goals of Let's Move was to get healthier food in schools. Not only just in school lunches, but in those vending machines and what we call the competitive food environment. So those were not just the government-sponsored lunches, but also the food that is being sold at schools. Also, there's a movement towards all those fundraisers, and all the selling of cookie dough and everything else, right? So all those fundraisers, how can we turn this? Schools still need to raise money, so how can we work with schools to help them with healthier school fundraisers? And so that's being worked on as well. But you can look this up, the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but it did pass by bipartisan support, which doesn't happen very often in our country, and to help ensure really that American kids were getting healthier lunches at school. Now, I'm not going to tell you that there's not controversy around this. There's controversy around everything, and everything can be politicized, but the bottom line is that it's working. So as more time passes, we will have more data, more results to show that there's an uptick in kids liking the healthy foods, eating it, and the like, asking for it, selecting it, and so making healthy choices. And that's what we really want to create, right? Young people that grow up to be adults who also make healthy choices, and then in turn help make healthy choices for their kids. That's really what we're about. So I'll let you, if you want more information on that, you can certainly look that up. Now Let's Move Childcare I mentioned. Remember, that's where we're having the best data that's coming forth in terms of reversing childhood obesity in America. And so you see the 5 practices that our childcare providers are focusing on: healthy eating, healthy beverages, increasing physical activity, limiting screen time, and supporting breastfeeding. So all of those things have come into play. Again, I want to reinforce that none of this is just government. It happens because of partnerships, and that's what I love so much about PCAL, because it is that kind of interagency group that brings industry together and non-government organizations with government. We've got to do it together, and I would tell you that our best outcomes are when we do that in America. And so I know PCAL has had great outcomes as well, and looking to do more. But I'm very encouraged by what I've heard from Peter and others about the progress there, and I really do feel that because you're looking at this as a holistic, as systemic, and looking at it, bringing all these different sectors together, that's where the success will come. And that's certainly what we're seeing. So for childcare, for example, we've got a huge healthcare system, Nemours, that is helping to implement Let's Move Childcare, and we're utilizing government and non-government entities all over the place to help implement. All right, let's move cities, towns, and counties. Let's talk about that for a moment. So let's move cities, towns, and counties is just that. It's really working with municipal governments, with local communities, with what we would call our mayors and our town councils and the like, and really giving them the tools. They set their own goals, and we kind of give them the tools. We don't tell them what to do, because last time I checked, that never works, right? So it's really about giving them the tools and, hey, here are some goals that we'd like you to consider. And by the way, if you work on these goals in a manner that is in keeping with progress, we're going to, give you kind of bronze, silver, and gold recognition. And so we're all about lifting up our local leaders who are doing just that. And notice that we're focused on physical activity and nutrition. Physical activity and nutrition. So goal number 1, again, I'm not going to go through these in detail, but again, that early start, smart start. We're also looking at MyPlate. Y'all know MyPlate from the U.S.? No? Some head nodding. So that's where our U.S. Department of Agriculture really leads our nutrition portfolio. And they developed several years ago now the MyPlate, which is kind of the consumer-facing version of our dietary guidelines, right? Because the dietary guidelines, put that in front of a family and forget it, right? It's too difficult, it's too complicated. But how do we bring that to life for real people? And that's what MyPlate does. And I'll talk a little bit more about this at the end, because they just launched MyPlate, My Wins, which is just all about making those small changes that can add up to be big results, right? So that it's not so overwhelming for us, or for individuals or its families, to change the way we eat. Okay? So I'm going to come back to that in a moment. All of this is online. By the way, if you go to letsmove.gov, it should be on one of these slides, but letsmove.gov, G-O-V, you can get to all of these programs and find out more. So number 3 for this, again, let's move cities, towns, and counties. And you can see how it's weaving in all of the other sub-initiatives, right? So smart servings for students. So that's how are our local municipalities working with their schools to make sure they're serving healthy meals, okay? Model food service, again, more of that. And the servings for kids as well refers to not only the early childhood, but in our schools as well. And then, of course, the active kids at play, and really focusing on play spaces. Do we have adequate play spaces for our young people? And whether that's during the school day, after school, in our communities, and the like. So we work on playgrounds. We work on providing access and making sure kids have places to go and to be active. Because quite honestly, we have a lot of recreation deserts too. Right? We have food deserts and recreation deserts. This is what it's looking like so far in terms of how many cities, towns, and counties are participating. We've gathered nearly 3,000 promising practices. And for some of you, we all know what works one place doesn't work in another. But we're trying to gather these promising practices so you can steal them. Other communities within the U.S., there's no good if you're not sharing it, right? So we're about getting the information out there, and if there are things that you can use, that you can try here in Australia and in New South Wales, please take it and use it and be successful. And then tell us about it. So we're representing nearly about 80 million of our 330 million Americans through our Let's Move cities, towns, and counties right now. And we have activity really in every state. Just so you know, from a health standpoint, if we divide up into 8 regions. And so we have, these are kind of our health regions, okay? And so we have regional health administrators in all 10 of these regions. Sorry, let me go back there a minute. So again, I will let you, this is all on the cities, towns, and counties website, but we know that cities, towns, and counties are hungry for more information, and this really just